going on. I like doing these webinars because it offers me an opportunity not only to share some of what I'm learning in my humble effort to help recovery, but it's always great to have participants, especially yourselves, who are also willing to help me to understand and help Stacy and I to understand what's helpful for you. And today, what we're really offering is something called, I think it was posted as families, codependent behaviors and boundaries. And as you look at the cover slide for this training, it says developing healthy self skills for coping with codependent behaviors. And the initial image that I offer is the one that you see up in the upper right hand corner, setting boundaries for family peace. And I think we'll get there, but I think we're going to get there in a different way. As I explored the information, and I always do a lot of research for these because I know what I know, but I also want to know what I don't know in a humble effort to maybe help you get what you're looking for. So clearly, in thinking about setting boundaries, I went beyond thinking about boundaries for families because I was reminded by the whitebison.org group that there are four parts to the circle. There are individuals, there are families, there are communities, and there are nations. And White Bison remind us that first the individual must heal, then the family can begin healing, then the community can start to heal, and then the nation can heal. So with that in mind, I'm really going to present this information and having you think about it. If you remember or recall the Recovery Coach Academy four-leg stool, the three-leg stool, the three legs of the stool are we actively listen, we ask good questions, and we discover and manage our stuff. Folks, as I explored this particular topic, a lot of my stuff came up, especially in relation to my own boundaries and my own efforts to not only live with codependent behaviors, but to help lead people through codependent behaviors. And so as I approach this, I hope it'll be helpful for you to look at this approach because, I think, clearly, if we're going to lead people through and help people to develop better boundaries, we need to understand our codependent behaviors, how those codependent behaviors impact relationships. And that's more than just looking at family boundaries. It's looking at personal individual boundaries, which we need to begin to address, which will help us to help the family to address, which will help our communities to address, and will help our nation to address. So with that in mind, I hope I haven't confused you right up front, but clearly as I go to I woke up this morning, I said, okay, I like this setting boundaries for family peace. That makes sense for me. But what makes greater sense for me in relation to what we're doing today is this second one. It says developing healthy self skills for working with codependent behaviors. And for me, that speaks to you teach best what you most need to learn. I encourage you to be open to learning about healthy self skills for working with codependent behaviors because we can't bring to another human being what we haven't brought to ourselves first. And clearly that speaks to our ability to discover and manage our stuff so that we can truly lead people or so we can truly connect with people in a way that'll be most helpful for them. Any questions about anything I said so far? And is this making sense for you so far? You teach best what you most need to learn. Think about that as we move forward. In developing healthy skills for working with codependent behaviors, over the next hour, we will describe codependency, identify what codependent behaviors look like and sound like. We'll describe ourselves and others interacting in both healthy and codependent relationships. And this is where there's a lot of discovery on my part. As much as I profess to care and have done this work over time, there are still pieces that came up that I said, especially around self-care. We'll identify skills for developing a way to a healthy self, including setting healthy boundaries. So we're gonna look at codependent behaviors, and we're gonna look at what boundaries are in relation to healthy behaviors related to working with codependency. And so, folks, it really puts the focus on you. It really puts the focus on us. Much as when we're sitting with recoveries, it's about them, it's not about us. In this particular setting, I want this to be about you so that you can understand you in the context of what this information means in your life so you can teach it as well as you can. I'm a firm believer that we teach best what we most need to learn. And when we teach what we learn it twice. So I clearly suggest and offer you the opportunity as soon as you can to practice what you may learn through this particular seminar. I want to give props right up front to what was the most helpful resource that I came across as I was um, in the process of researching this. And there's a resource called Your Healthy Self Skills for Working with Codependent Behaviors by a woman named Nancy Johnston. And she verbalizes over the last 10 or 12 years in her work as a counselor, especially with substance abuse. There were discoveries that she made and there was information that she gathered that really, if you look at this resource, look up this resource, there are over 100 pages of information related to working with codependent behaviors. And it becomes more extensive than I'm able to offer in this hour. And I encourage you to look at that because I think that's the way that you build your own art of working with codependent behaviors and you build your own art of setting better limits and boundaries. Questions, thoughts, comments? How are we doing so far? Good. Good, good, good. Please, folks, at any point in time when you need clarification, when you need something, just type it in, and I'm here. This is about you. It's not about me. So let's move on. Take a shot at it, folks. What is codependency? What is codependency as you understand it at this point? You saw a webinar being offered on families, codependency, and setting limits. In your and I'm not looking for packed definitions. I'm looking for you to describe through your own experience personally or through your experience in helping others. Mike, it's an unhealthy reliance on something or someone else. I like that. It's an unhealthy reliance on something or someone else. The key piece there for me, codependency is unhealthy. Anybody else want to take a shot at it? Welcome, Geraldo. Not to put you on the spot, buddy, just recognizing you're there. What is codependency as we start this work? I want you to help to build your own awareness. But what are we starting with? Anybody else want to take a shot at it? What is codependency? Brenda's typing. It's using situations you're in with others to learn about yourself. Wow. Wow, Brenda. Thank you. Because for me, that speaks to what we do as recovery coaches. To me, that speaks to what the shift in paradigm and how we choose to provide care is about. It's helping us to look at what we learn in situations versus be so fearful of situations. Part of my developing my own art of working with people is my ability to be aware of who I am in situations. So using situations that I'm in with others to learn about myself is clearly a part of that. And it is an unhealthy reliance. And think about it, it's an unhealthy reliance that can be on the part of another person or myself. Because a lot of the work we're going to look at today is ourselves in relationships with others and see how that works for us. Take a look at this diagram and tease out even more what you're looking at, what codependency is. This comes from, it's cited at the bottom what the source is. It's saying trying to control someone else's behavior, needing to be needed, activities done to excess. That's one that came up a lot in the work that I'm going to share with you. It might be a bad habit. It might be a result of insecurity. It might be as a result of manipulation. But in the midst of those three intersecting circles, this particular diagram identifies that codependency involves all these issues and becomes what it becomes. Any thoughts or questions about this image? Does it make sense for you? Think about it. Again, I love to share as much as I can share, especially images, because images offer me the opportunity to glean or identify for myself what it means for me. And this is one of those images when I looked at it, I said, it is about that unhealthy reliance that people are talking about, which is fueled by insecurity, but to efforts to manipulate or control and habits that become ongoing. I think it is, Mike. This image just jumped out at me when I saw it, and especially in relation, it's related to addiction. Any other thoughts about the image? I can see this being very useful. Thanks, Mike. That's what I'm looking for. As much as I'm not going to clearly put the focus on families, you hit the nail on the head. I share information like this with people that I'm working with, whether it be in individual groups or family. And the image is one that I say to people, image in, imagine, identify what you see, and let's talk about what you see. And that helps people to gain a language. It helps people to share what they know. It helps people to get in touch with what they don't know. But more importantly, it gets us into conversations that matter about some issues that so many times seem to be out there in space. And I think our ability to help people to see what they see helps the process. So, Mike, thank you for that feedback. I too believe that this is an important piece to share with families, as is all this information. You know, it's about working with individuals who work in their families to improve the quality of their lives and to create healing forests in which more and more can grow. So if we can work with the recovery, or we can work with the recovery's family or a member of that family and help them to understand this information better, we have an opportunity to begin to impact families in the way that I think you're coming to look to impact them. Any other thoughts on this particular diet, this particular image? Image in. Codependency is over functioning in someone else's life and under functioning in your own life. Can anybody relate? Over functioning in someone else's life and under functioning in your own life. I think of Beth. Welcome, Beth. Codependency is over functioning. I think that's a very non threatening way to approach it with families. How do you perceive it to be non threatening, Beth? I believe so. What's your sense of this being non threatening? How do you think this helps a discussion or a conversation that matters around codependency? So I agree with you. It speaks to function rather than dysfunction. Love it, love it, love it. If you've been around me long enough, when I think about dysfunction, especially when I think about dysfunctional families, dysfunctional relationships, appreciate that dysfunction means living with pain. And the issue becomes, how do we live with pain and fear in our relationships, whether they be family relationships or intimate relationships or work relationships, and on and on and on. Again, as a result of the Recovery Coach Academy, I'm constantly aware that so much of the work is about relationships and building relationships that work, building functional relationships. So if I'm in a relationship that I'm over functioning in someone else's life and under functioning in my own life, that's problematic. And it's problematic probably because of the result of my so wanting to be what I so want to be with that other person, which is based in fear and the pain of not being successful. It boils down to what the Bike Bison group has taught me. How do we function functionally in dysfunction? And codependency is over functioning in the dysfunction. And that's my stuff as a helper. And it becomes family member stuff in their honest effort to help family members through. So the ability for them to begin to recognize some of these concepts is their ability to perhaps be different. I often tell loved ones, you are not responsible for a person, you are responsible to, yes, 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 I love it. To be responsible for someone is to enable them, to infantilize them, to take control of their lives, to do it for them. To be responsible to someone is how we empower people. That's where true care is. I like that, Beth. We are responsible. We are not responsible for a person or their behaviors, but we are responsible to their recovery and helping them to understand what that recovery may look like. Codependency is centering your life around someone else's life and not taking care of your own. It is overfunctioning in someone else's life, which limits the other person's growth, keeping them from being capable and responsible. I think this is one that can hit family members between the eyeballs as well, or clearly can hit us as helpers through the eyeballs. If I'm overfunctioning in a recovery's life, how am I truly helping them? So much of the work is for people to be capable and responsible. And if we constantly are over functioning in someone's life, doing things for them that are critical for them to learn how to do for themselves, then how are they able to respond to their own lives? Got a couple. I've got Brenda and Beth typing. Thank you. I'm going to add one more piece to while they're typing. Codependency is intending to help, yet the over-involvement ultimately hurts the healthy development of the other person's mind. Beth writes, an initial effort to step back is hard, but so worth it. When you say step back, Brenda, meaning let them be open to the outcome and not attached to it, that initial effort to be open to the outcome and not attached to the outcome is so worth it because I learn, the recovery learns, the family learns from whatever outcome or consequence the behaviors are offering. Beth states, and what behavior are we enforcing? A question I always try to keep in the back of my mind. Yes. What behavior are we reinforcing? What behavior are we encouraging? And appreciate how people look at us and pay attention to what we do. So again, if I'm going into these situations with my own codependency issues still a part of that process, I've got to be careful because people are watching. Excellent. Let's move on. Codependency is overfunctioning in someone else's life when we carry the following behaviors too far. When we give too much, caretake too much, help too much, think for others too much, speak for others too much, take over others' lives too much, fix too much, serve too much, control too much, and do for others what they need to do for themselves too much. Make sense? Does this resonate with what you see? Does this resonate with how you think about codependency, over functioning in another person's life? The key piece that comes up later is taking these behaviors too far. It's all right to give. It's all right to caretake. It's all right to help. It's all right to help others to think. It's all right to offer others an opportunity to practice speaking for themselves. It's all right at some level to take over the path because we know where we're going. But appreciate anytime we do for others what they need to do for themselves, we are infantilizing them. We are disempowering them. And recovery coaching recovery, especially in a peer sense, is an empowerment process. So overfunctioning in someone else's lives can have significant consequences for any relationship. Codependency is also underfunctioning in your own life, which may include behaviors and the consequences that follow. Self-neglect, including neglect of your health, work, money, and friendships. Can you see how self-neglect can be a product or a consequence or an outcome of being codependent, which puts you in a position of underfunctioning in your own life? Grasp this concept of underfunctioning in your own life. Talk to me, folks. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? Is this making sense for you? Help me to think about how you're thinking about codependency, overfunctioning, and underfunctioning. We're right here looking at self-neglect, neglecting health. Where anybody ever been there? Anybody ever been in a position where you're not taking as good a care of yourself as you're taking care of the person you're making an effort to help? It killed my mom. Oh yeah, daily, Brenda. I hear you. My soapbox is to address stress and to address the issues that in the name of caring we end up controlling out of our fear. That's what my mom did. And that fear was so prevalent, it caused so much anxiety and fear in her life that she overfunctioned in our lives and clearly underfunctioned in her own life, which resulted in her having a heart attack as a result of her relationship with alcohol at the age of 46 years old. Absolutely, with good intentions, but good intentions pave the way to hell. Yes. In my quest to help others, I am neglecting myself. How can I give what I don't have? Well stated, Henry. I'm constantly reinforcing that. Folks, if you're coaching recovery, you need a coach. I need a coach. I need people to help me to make sure that my own wellness is being addressed as I'm helping others' wellness to be addressed. And I think one of the pieces of in my you know can't pour from an empty cup. Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I think you get it, folks. I mean, for me, this is clearly a piece that merits looking very deeply at, and it'll come more at you as we move on because the more I went through this piece on underfunctioning in our own lives, the more I realized that this really speaks to the self-care that's such a challenge for us. Day 5 of the Recovery Coach Academy through CCAR says that an occupational hazard of people who take care of other people is that we don't take very good care of ourselves. And for me, that smacks of codependency. It smacks of codependency. Beth says, I'm a visual person and I often tell people things like that. Or the example of being on an airplane. Then they tell you the oxygen mask drop and you put yours on first. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know what, Beth? Extending that visual, extending that concept, I think it's also important to help people to hear that you can't bring to your children what you don't bring to you. So if your children are acting out, or if your children are struggling with limits, maybe if you learn how to better set limits and boundaries, they will too. Training RCAs has helped me to practice and see such great results in myself. It is a great side effect. When you teach something, Brenda, you learn it twice. And that's been my experience. I mean, the value of sitting with people and collaborating in their learning on how to develop their own art of helping other people enhances my art of helping other people as well. Well stated. Codependency is underfunctioning in your own life, and it may include failing to consider yourself in decisions and planning. The development of ethical and legal problems, including lying, misrepresentation, and bankruptcy. And the development of physical and or psychological problems, including anxiety and depression. Folks, we come to talk about working with families and helping families to address codependency and helping families to address setting their best limits. But when you look at this list, I think we've all had some experience with the challenges that these bullets offer. And I'm asking you to think about it, this concept of codependency as being under functioning in your own life. And get honest about what you see. And get honest about how you're experiencing this because again, you can't bring to someone else's life what you haven't brought to yours. And so this is a part of the middle leg of that three-legged stool that offers you an opportunity to discover and manage your own stuff. Talk to me about this slide because it's a very critical one, I think, in this process because it takes the underfunctioning in our own lives and has us think about it and look at it. And how comfortable are you in looking at it? And how comfortable are you in addressing some of these issues if they're in your life? And if they don't make sense to you, some of the slides beyond this may help. But any thoughts or questions about this particular slide? Helpful, not helpful, make sense to you, not make sense to you. Codependency is under functioning in your own life. Take a look. Think about this. If you were the caregiver of another person the way you care for yourself, would you be guilty of neglect? If you were the caregiver of another person the way you care for yourself, would you be guilty of neglect? Not necessarily answering the question, but respond to the question if you would, please. And what does this talk about in relation to what we're talking about, under functioning in our own lives, an element of codependency? And the other question is, great way to look at it. Yeah, so did I. Neither did I, Beth. This is something that, I pulled this image together on my own, probably about 3 months ago, because it's constantly on my mind. How do we help? Yeah, how do we help ourselves to help others? And again, when I was doing this piece, it made so much sense because here I was thinking about this hazardous caring, and codependency can be hazardous caring. It's important that we look at how we are relating with other people and who we are in relation to those other people. It's a great way to look at it, Beth says. I wish I saw that years ago. And Mike says, at sometimes, yes. How are you guilty of neglecting yourself, your self-care? Anybody want to put that on the table? Just to give us examples of what we do and how we do it. What might be your greatest limitation or challenge in this area? Wow. And the question is, Mike, how's that working for you? Honestly. Anyone else? How do you neglect you in the process of helping others? Excellent. That's why we do it, Mike. And that's why we supply you with the recording of the webinar, the slides of the webinar, because, in an hour, we're just touching surfaces. In an hour, I'm hoping to encourage thinking about these issues in a way you haven't thought about it before, than you walking away and acting on it. And acting on it is your ability to develop your own art of boundary setting and living with codependency. It's good to hear your comment as well, Mike, because Stacy and I go back and forth on what will be helpful. So, Stacy, I think this is definitely helpful. Brenda's typing. And do put this in perspective, folks. For me, I'm sharing with you what is a nice piece of information slash science that I'm suggesting that you think about, wonder about, and practice acting on working on your own way of presenting this information to recoveries, to their families, or to whoever else you feel this would be helpful for. You teach best what you most need to learn, and when you teach it, you learn it twice. Brenda says, I start with an intention of time for myself, but that ends up being unprotected, available time. Yeah. And how's that working for you, Brenda? Honestly. Ah, yeah. Me too. Me too. And I want you to think about how can you make it work better for you. Your ability to make it work better for you is your ability to make it work well enough for people you're making an effort to help. Again, folks, we're talking about family, we're talking about relationships, we're talking about boundaries and helping families through, but clearly it starts with individuals. And if I'm, as Brenda says, in the midst of all this, that's not helpful. It's not helpful because it's hard for me to share something that I'm not living. It feels so hypocritical. It feels so hypocritical. But again, it's no blame, no judgment. It's about problem solving. I like this image. It talks about relationships, enmeshed relationships, alienated relationships, and healthy relationships. What do you see? And do these concepts are these concepts you've experienced or heard of? When you think about relationships, what might be an enmeshed relationship? How might you describe an enmeshed relationship? How would you describe an alienated relationship? And how have you described a healthy relationship? And have you been in these three areas of relationships? And which are building relationships and which are destroying relationships? This is so much of what I think this work is about, relationships. What's an enmeshed relationship before I expose um, a description of it? What is an enmeshed relationship? And again, folks, images. Appreciate the ability to share this information with families or individuals. Enmesh is super codependent. Pretty much. Pretty much. What is the enmeshment and how does that affect the individual parties within the context of that enmeshment? And how does that enmeshment work for people and how does it not work for people? Because more times than not, what we do at some level has some value to us. And so the ability to dispel or little, if any, sense of identity of their own. Yes. When we're enmeshed, it's almost like we're one. So many times people feel that when they get married, it makes people one. It doesn't make people one. Lose yourself in an enmeshed relationship. Yes, yes, yes. And a mesh relationship is a relationship that stays pretty stuck with each person holding on to the other and little space for consideration of self and the self of the other person. The overlapping circles stay in this position for the most part, eclipsing each individual. I like that word, eclipsing. Like the eclipse of the moon. One of us is losing ourselves, identity, our ability to shine is blanked and blocked out by the enmeshment. This definition or this description makes sense for you folks. I mean, it mirrors what both Beth and Mike have spoke about. We've got Brenda writing. You'll see later on, Mike, that it is about losing self. Visual learner, these representations drive the message home. Yeah, it's important that we find how people best learn. And so for me, I love PowerPoints because it offers images, it offers words, it offers an opportunity for a person through the process of being offered information to wonder and explore that information within their own minds and then develop on how they will act on the information. I think they do drive the message home. When we think about the alienated self, what might that sound like or look like? The alienated self. When you look at that image, what's your perception or your vision or your visual of an alienated relationship? And have you ever experienced one? No connection. Bingo! I love it. I love it. Individuals in the relationship do not intersect/connect. They do not share themselves with each other. They do not come together in meaningful ways. They keep their distance from each other. No blame, no judgment. But folks, when I saw this alienated relationship, I remembered the boundaries and the expectations of how I was to perform my duties as a counselor who was bound to no self disclosure and the like. It made, for me, it was hard to make the connections that were critical and important. An alienated relationship is minimal to no connection. Well stated, Mike. And how might you describe, I think the most difficult of the three, the one that, we're trying to understand more, how would you describe a healthy relationship? How would you describe? And again, given the nature of whatever processes you are going through to begin to develop more healthy relationships or what you've seen in others that you perceive to be healthy, how might you describe a healthy relationship? Because again, folks, I think the power of this information is for people to, families and individuals, to get a sense of what they might be aspiring to or what they're looking to co-create through their involvement with peer helpers. What makes a healthy boundaries that allow for each to be individual but also working together in meaningful ways? Well stated. Well stated. The circles or people in a healthy relationships overlap some, yet not completely. The individuals are able to both share themselves and keep a separate sense of self. The individuals are able to move toward or away from each other as needed and desired. Protected time for self and others. Well stated, Brenda. Healthy relationship is protected time for self and others. And the challenge is to protect that time. The challenge is to give myself what I need as much as I give the other person what they are helping me to appreciate is helpful for them as well. Nice work, folks. Thank you. Healthy relationships. Each circle or person has its own boundaries. The two circles can intersect and cross each other as much as is mutually agreed upon. The circles can range from nearly completely overlapped to completely separated, depending on the expressed needs of each person and mutual respect between them. Healthy relationships are dynamic. They allow for change and flow. Healthy relationships are dependent on having two individuals aware of their separateness and togetherness and wanting to foster their self and their relationship in this way. What do you think about this slide? What do you get from this slide? How would you summarize a healthy relationship to a family or to an individual in recovery or to any individual you're working with? How might you begin to describe healthy relationships related to boundaries? I always ask, how do you make this real and alive and, and understandable for my 10-year-old grandson? Protected time for self and others. We respect each other's boundaries. I appreciate that the other person, again, Recovery Coach Academy, it's about them, it's not about me. And yet, in healthy relationships, it also has to be about me and my needs as well. I think that's where I got lost a lot. I was so busy on trying to help the other person take care of their needs, my feelings, my my thoughts, boundaries, and honest communication. That's it. That's how we set them up. Boundaries through honest communication. You'll see that coming up. Well stated, Mike. A healthy self is the balance between care of self and care of others. Think about your own self, your own internal needs, wants, feelings, thoughts, actions, and spirit. Think about the other person, their own needs, wants, feelings, thoughts, actions, and spirits. What's the tipping point in your efforts to help at this point? Is it balanced like it is here, or is it tipped towards the other? And can you see the value and the importance of self-care relative to taking care of my needs, wants, feelings, thoughts, actions, and spirit in the realm of my humble effort to help another person? This is worth constantly keeping in my head. And one of the reasons, the ways I keep it in my head is I remind myself, show you care for you too. Communicate, as Mike said earlier. Ask for what you need. Reach for what you need in your relationships. And again, a coach needs a coach. Engage in whatever you get in asking for what you need, and take care. This is about caring for the caregiver, folks. If the caregiver cares for the caregiver, I believe that the caregiver does a better job of teaching care and teaching boundaries through honest communication and helping people to break through the codependency that becomes such a, a, a binding force in families as well as individuals. A healthy self is the constant effort to balance the care of myself and the care of others. As much as I want it to be all about them, that doesn't work. I look at another piece. Years ago, I did a course called Helping Without Hurting with a good friend of mine. And Helping Without Hurting basically spoke about help is a humble effort to lend power, and hurt is the harmful undermining of responsibility to ... And you'll see that play itself out. When I help another human being, it's my humble effort to live, learn, and lead power as I understand it. Power are partnerships overcoming weakness, empowering responsibility. And for me, that clearly encompasses what I make an effort to do as a coach of recovery in working with individuals and families. It's a humble effort for them to learn power. And it's an opportunity on my part to do no hurt, which is a harmful undermining of responsibility to the other person. Again, the materials that I looked at talks about giving, fixing, and caretaking. And again, folks, those within themselves are not the issues. When you look, it's okay in giving, fixing, and caretaking to make offers within your resources, i.e. your money, your time, and your energy. It's okay to offer or accept the other person's acceptance or rejection of your offer. And it's okay to make suggestions and then leave those suggestions alone. We go too far when we make offers outside of our resources and carry them out, causing debt, exhaustion, or losses on our part. We go too far when we force our offer on the other person or we insist on them accepting our offer. And we go too far when we assist upon our suggestions and or actually carrying them out for the other person. Can you see this? Can you see this as, a real clear boundary between helping and hurting? Can you see this as a real challenge for us? It's okay to give, and at some level, to help people to fix their lives and to caretake, but let's appreciate when we're going too far. When we go too far, we're hurting that relationship and that person or that family's ability to make the progress that's critical for their progress. And when we provide that okay, we're helping. Making an honest effort to share some of my own thinking over time. This basically gets on that helping without hurting piece again. And it just identifies some concepts of families that help and families that hurt. Families that help have few rules that are fair, negotiable, respected, enforced consistently, and create a predictable environment. Native American Four Laws of Change says we need to create a healing force for healing to occur. So with fewer rules that are fair, negotiable, respected, enforced consistently, we can create a more predictable environment, which I think has the ability to impact and set the boundaries that are critical. Families that help take risks to express feelings, ideas, and beliefs in an open, responsible, and respectful way. Families that help have members that take time with each other individually and together, and a strong parent partnership. Families that help respect and accept honest expressions of sensitive feelings. Families that help treat members with respect and interest. Families that help are open and to change and open-minded. Families that help deal with problems and pain. They manage and deal with their stress. Families that help have less need to control each other and have parents in charge who are open to negotiation and respect the opinions of children or adolescents. Families that help care. Families that hurt have too many rules that are unfair, strict, ignored, enforced inconsistently, and create a chaotic environment. Families that hurt communicate double messages. They should on each other. They produce ought tos and are secretive. Families that hurt take sides and reject each other and have hidden partnerships and weak or non-existent parent partnership. Families that hurt disrespect, deny, fear, or reject feelings and try to hurt each other. Families that hurt disrespect and ignore members. Families that hurt are not open to change and are narrow-minded. Families that hurt deny problems and pain, deny and increase stress, and have strict or shifting patterns of control, and children or adolescents are running the family. Clearly boundary issues here, folks. But clearly when we see that families that help are families that are open in their communication, as Mike said, and have boundaries that speak to acceptance, respect, and communication. Helpful? And any questions? This is something that I developed, almost 20 years ago. And, I'm going to bring it back because it's so much about, for me, Mike, it helps me to begin to help people to think about what their boundaries might look like. And most importantly, it speaks to what you talked about, honest communication. I care or I don't care. So much of the hurtful side, when I don't care, is out of fear. I try to control. And control is not care. And control is not caring. Helping without hurting. Clearly, and something to think about. We're thinking about communicating boundaries and communicating ways of relating with each other that allow for growth as well as respect and dignity. Gets back to what we learned again, folks. Families that help versus families that hurt treat each other as resources versus objects. I like that it includes action words on both sides so you can see where changes can take place. Thank you, Brenda. That makes sense for me. Action words or gerund words are clearly what I try to do. And yeah. So again, feel free. Think about this information. People don't know what they don't know. And so if you don't know what you don't know, how am I going to be a solution in my own life? So as you get to know more and more and more about what codependency looks like, what helpful boundaries might look like, and you share this information with families or individuals, they get to know more. And in knowing more, they get to act on it in ways that have greater opportunity for change to occur. Excuse me. Skill development and setting healthy boundaries. Real simple stuff. Again, folks, I leave it to you to take what you learn from this and continue to build on it. Again, the resource that really is the centerpiece of this particular webinar for me is over 100 pages long. Immerse yourself in it. Immerse yourself in where it takes you towards other resources. Because in order for any change to occur, whether it be in our efforts to help or in the efforts of family members to change, a great learning must occur. And a critical part of that learning is developing skills towards healthy boundaries. What are boundaries? What are healthy boundaries? And what are unhealthy boundaries? Boundaries and boundary settings. Boundaries highlight the fact that there is a place where you end and the other person begins. Remember those circles? I end where the ends of where my circle lines are. And then there are the times I couldn't find where I end because I'm overlapped on another person's circle. Boundary setting is about developing a clear sense of who we are and where we stand and acknowledging the same for the other person. I like this because it gets to that power circle that Andres Ariane speaks about in her anthropological work on the fourfold way of living. She identifies our power lies in our ability to know ourselves, to take a stand relative to who and how we are and knowing ourselves, our values, our beliefs, and being open to that in the other person. So in setting clear boundaries, I know who I am, I know where I stand, and I acknowledge that for the same person. And someone said early on in this discussion, we lose ourselves in our codependency. And losing ourselves is losing who we are and where we stand. Boundary setting is about establishing some limits for yourself of what you will and won't tolerate in a particular situation. That's where I stand up for myself. I have a presence. I acknowledge and I verbalize what I need in the relationship while I'm also listening to what the other person needs. Boundary setting means that you are able to listen to yourself, know your limits, and firmly set those limits to yourself and the other person. If you don't set the limits, folks, and assert the limits and practice the limits, they are valueless. And sometimes in our humble effort to help, we lose ourselves, we lose our limits, thinking that we're being helpful. Be careful, folks. It's about them, it's not about me. It doesn't say to lose me in the process. Boundaries and boundary setting. Setting boundaries is a healthy, friendly thing to do. It helps us to know the limits of our relationships and our interactions. We put that out front. Healthy boundaries that I set up right up front with people that I work with. I tell them day one that I sit with them, I'm going to work as hard as you work on your recovery. However, if I experience that I'm working harder than you are, I'm going to stop what I'm doing and I'm going to see what you do. That's helpful. That's healthy. And at some level, it's friendly because it's letting the person know where I'm coming from and allows them to verbalize their acceptance or non-acceptance of that. Our children need boundaries and limits. So do the adults with whom we interact. And we often need to set limits with ourselves. On a daily basis, we are given opportunities to practice setting and keeping our boundaries. That's the cool thing about it. If I don't do what I need to do, I can continue. I get other opportunities to do it. I don't beat myself up if I slip by a limit or if I don't practice a boundary. But I do remind myself of the importance of giving that to myself. And most importantly, to the relationship that I'm looking to build versus destroy. I destroy relationships if I don't have boundaries in place because it becomes too fluid between us and we lose sight of where we're going and what we need. Healthy boundary setting comes from centering in self first, then interacting with the other person to that own self be true. Skill sets, real simple. State your boundary, say things once, stick with your limits, remember your reasons for your boundaries and your limits, learn when to stop, and stop. Any thoughts about these skill sets? I mean, it's simple, and yet, how do we do it? How do we state our boundary? We do it up front. Say things once means that I don't go back and forth. It's my boundary. I've set my boundaries up for a purpose. If I'm going back and forth, this is when you work with adolescents. Oh my goodness, I go back and forth and back and forth. Yeah, yeah, Beth. It's simple. And you get more clarification again through the document that I cited up front. She gives you 2 or 3 more slides just to identify what those areas might look like. But yeah, it is simple. And I do encourage you to share with people that you work with. Share it with people that you work with so that they know what your boundaries are. And share it with people that you work with, which takes on your ability to be a model, a role model, a piece of evidence on how to live life better. I like that. You're on it, Beth. It's simple and share it. Setting boundaries is a way of caring for yourself. It doesn't make you mean, selfish, or uncaring because I don't want to do things your way. I care about me too. I love that. That's right on the mark. Questions, comments, helpful, not helpful. Is there anything what can you walk away with? What's your takeaways? Oh, lots of typing. Love it, love it, love it. Again, folks, I remind you of the resource I cited. I think it was on slide 3. You'll love it. You'll love it. It's been my pleasure, Beth. Thank you so much for participating and teaching me what you've taught me today. Nice stuff. I like to go back and look at these webinars and just embrace what people have shared. Balance is very important for caretakers. Boundaries and honest communication is key to any healthy relationship. Well summarized, Mike. Well summarized. Balance is very important for caretakers. Boundaries and honest communication is key to any healthy relationship. Keep it simple. That's right on it. Very helpful. I'm reminded of self-care and how important setting boundaries are to self-care. Great welcome. It was for me too, Henry, as I was doing this. I said, damn, this is speaking about self-care again. How do you get away from it? But I don't need to get away from it. I can't bring care to another person's life if I haven't brought care to my own. Not for nothing, when I describe recovery over the evolution of my own process of over 37 years, it's turning my life over to care, period. The care of other people and the care of myself. And in my humble effort to be of care in other people, boundaries are critical. Thank you, folks. Thank you, Stacy, as always. Well done, young lady. Enjoy your day. Thank you. Bye bye.